Back here tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Eastern. Hardball starts right now.
Lord of the Flies. Let's play hardball. Dropping. In only his first 7 months in office, Donald Trump has shed almost all of his senior staff. The result, one of the most chaotic, unstable West Wings in recent history. Take a look at this incredible photo. It's of the men pictured in late January. The only ones that remain in that picture are President Trump and Vice President Pence, constitutional officers. Then there was the firing of James Comey in May. The president himself said that the Russian thing was on his mind. And, of course, there was the spectacular implosion of the Mooch, Anthony Scaramucci. His tenure was brief. Of course, his downfall was unforgettable. What does it all mean for the Trump White House? The HR, if you will, chaos paralleled perhaps the governing chaos we've seen. We've got an all-star panel to talk about that tonight. The Wall Street Journal's Eli Stokel, USA Today's Heidi Presbla, and The Root's Jason Johnson. We begin with Donald Trump's first national security advisor. Remember him? General Michael Flynn was a bombastic attack dog during the campaign. Let's watch and listen.
We do not need a reckless president who believes she is above the law. Lock her up. That's right. That's right. Lock her up. I'm going to tell you what. If a guy who knows this business, if I did a tenth of what she did, I would be in jail today.
Well, the irony must have been lost on him. Anyway, hours after Flynn was canned on February 13th, the Washington Post reported the acting attorney general informed the Trump White House late last month that she believed Michael Flynn had misled senior administration officials about the nature of his communications with the Russian ambassador to the United States and warned that the national security advisor was potentially vulnerable to Russian blackmail. Remarkably, President Trump defended the man he fired a few days later, spinning his firing as though Flynn had been the victim of the media.
Michael Flynn, General Flynn, is a wonderful man. I think he's been treated very, very unfairly by the media, as I call it, the fake media in many cases. And I think it's really a sad thing that he was treated so badly.
Well, President Trump also said Flynn didn't do anything wrong by reaching out to the Russians prior to the inauguration. Let's watch.
I just want to clarify an important point, I think.
Sure.
Did you direct Mike Flynn to discuss sanctions with the Russian ambassador prior to your inauguration?
No, I didn't.
And would you have fired him if the information hadn't leaked out?
No, I fired him because of what he said to Mike Pence. Very simple. Mike was doing his job. He was calling countries and his counterparts. So it certainly would have been okay with me if he did it. I would have directed him to do it if I thought he wasn't doing it. I didn't direct him, but I would have directed him because that's his job.
Why do you think Flynn left? He was fired.
He was fired, and there was a lot of discussion inside about, do we have to fire him? Mike Pence sort of laid the gauntlet down and said, this guy lied to me, I want him out. And there were a lot of people inside the White House who wanted Flynn out anyway because he was one of the Bannon guys. He was too close to, he's running the NSC. I mean, there was just a lot of people in defense circles that were worried about Mike Flynn having that job in the first place. And one common thread throughout all these firings is the fact that, these are all born of a campaign that actually didn't expect to win, didn't expect to have to put a transition together. Then suddenly they win, and there's this very hastily thrown together transition. So a lot of people weren't fully vetted the way normal transitions and incoming administrations are going to vet people. And that's why you've had so much turnover just in general in the first several months. But the Flynn was an interesting case because, it's always a matter of like pressure on Trump or pressure on the person, whether it comes from most of the time it comes from the media reporting.
Well, this time
in this case, it all came out. Pence took a stand, and the president said, okay, I'll do it. And you could hear days later, he was sort of regretting that he felt backed into a corner and forced to do this.
What about the acting attorney general, Sally Yates? coming out and saying, wait a minute, the guy's basically in hostage to the Russians because they know they had talks with him about sanctions, and he's out there denying it.
And that's why all of this is so unbelievable, that the administration didn't know these things, and this is why timing is so important when you ask why, Chris. Let's back up a little bit and point out that this came after bombshell reporting about those talks that Flynn was having and that they had to do with sanctions. It is highly unlikely that the administration did not know these things, which were supposedly the premise for Flynn's firing prior to the publishing of that news reporting. It was the news reporting which put sunlight on this and forced the administration into taking those steps. So, we still don't know. We saw the question to the president about whether he directed these talks. Fine, he says he didn't direct them. Did he know about it? That is still something we're going to find out, hopefully, as Bob Mueller's investigation goes on.
Jason, I think we all have the same buzzword. We all live here in Washington, and maybe it's a little dull right now, but for months now, everyone's talked about this guy as a flipper.
Right.
Everybody thinks the president keeps saying nice things about him because he's hoping he can soften him out of reporting in his own interest what went on between him and the Russians, and what the president knew about what went on between him and the Russians.
I think that's highly likely, but I also think
likely that he'll flip.
Well, I think it's likely that he'll flip. I think that what happened with Paul Manafort was a warning to people like Michael Flynn, like, we'll do this to you. We will send FBI guys in the vinyl jackets to your house to make you look bad. But I also think this was the beginning of what we've seen throughout this entire administration. Yes, there were problems with Flynn. Yes, there were warnings, but it was also a panic move. And even though Trump is regretting it now, and even though he's like, no, I think Michael Flynn's a nice guy and I want him to be covered, I think there were a lot of panic moves at the beginning because, as we've mentioned, I don't think they expected to win. I don't think they thought this was going to be much of a problem. I don't think they expected the press to investigate the way they have, and that's why Michael Flynn is gone.
Well, why did he wait to hear the press announce the fact that there had been this problem with his conversations that he wasn't up front with the vice president about? Why did he wait even when he found out about that until, well, you take up, why did he wait till the press reported it? Would he have kept Flynn otherwise?
Yeah. Probably. I mean, until something else came out. This is the guy who...
Because he has to protect himself. That's why you can't fire people.
Flynn
you throw them to the wolves and they talk.
What? Well, what we now know is that Flynn wasn't the only one. His son-in-law was also talking to the Russians about a back channel. So much more reporting has come out since the firing of Flynn that shows there were other people who did the same darn thing.
Well, Flynn
still also forgot 100 or so things on his FS-86. He still has a job. I mean, of all these people that we're going to talk about who have gotten fired, Jared Kushner's still there.
You know why? He's married to his lovely daughter. Anyway, in May came the... Go ahead, Jason.
Look, you break up the marriage and then your wife or your husband can testify against you, right? I mean, he wanted to keep Flynn.
Well, the Javanka is not a bad term that guy came up with because they are close. I mean, he obviously loves his son-in-law, too.
Right.
Look, I've always called them the Romanovs because they behave less like a political operation than a family, because they are a family. Anyway, in May came the shocking news that President Trump was firing his FBI director. The White House first said Trump went along with a recommendation by his then Attorney General, still, and Deputy Attorney General to fire him because of his handling of the Clinton email investigation. Then a few days later, the president said he would have fired him no matter what, and it was really all about the Russian thing. Those are the president's terms, the Russian thing. Then President Trump proceeded to attack Comey.
He's a showboat. He's a grandstander. The FBI has been in turmoil. You know that. I know that. Everybody knows that. Director Comey was very unpopular with most people. I actually thought when I made that decision, and I also got a very, very strong recommendation, as you know, from the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein. But when I made that decision, I actually thought that it would be a bipartisan decision.
You know, I love it the way Lester Holt gives you that poker face when he says, here he is, the guy, Donald Trump, saying that guy's a showboat. Showboater, excuse me. Anyway, what about this thing? This Comey thing seems to have really got bad legs for this president.
This is by far the most consequential of all the firings. And it's, the reason why is this is what triggered the appointment of Bob Mueller to lead, as a special counsel to lead
Explain
this
that triggering mechanism. Why did Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, the acting Attorney General, in the case of anything to do with Russia, because the other guy, because Sessions has recused himself.
Because
why did he have to? What was the reason he gave then for we need a special counsel?
Just the memo, the Comey memo came out about at that point where we learned that the president had tried to one-on-one pressure Comey to back off the investigation of Flynn. And so Rosenstein was put in an impossible situation. He had no choice but to appoint that special prosecutor. Given this raised real questions about obstruction of justice.
Explain that a little further. Explicate. Because the president wasn't trustworthy in this regard. He was really going to be the target of this further investigation. But why didn't they just name a new FBI director?
This opened the president to new questions about obstruction of justice. Naming a new FBI director, the FBI director would then be working for the president. This would take it outside that kind of chain of command that you needed to have a special counsel.
There's also sort of the political consideration. You had members of the Senate, you had members of the House, you had people concerned that as long as the Russian investigation was being handled by Comey, it was over there. It was handled by the FBI. If you have Comey not there and you have him being fired because the president says, I want him off the Russia thing, then it's on the backs of the Senate. Then the Senate has to investigate. Then the public expects them. Then the press expects them to be the most aggressive investigators of the situation. So I think in some respects, it was a way of keeping this over on the side. As long as Mueller is working in silence, not talking to the public on a regular basis, it's then not on the pockets and not in the sort of pants of.
But it's still not in the president's interest that any of this go on. Anyway, in June, the country watched Comey testify before the Senate and excoriate President Trump.
I was honestly concerned that he might lie about the nature of our meeting, and so I thought it really important to document.
Quote, I hope, this is the president speaking, I hope you can see your way clear to letting this go, to letting Flynn go. He is a good guy. I hope you can let this go.
I took it as a direction. Right. I mean, this is the president of the United States with me alone saying, I hope this. I took it as this is what he wants me to do. Now, it's my judgment that I was fired because of the Russia investigation. I was fired in some way to change, or the endeavor was to change the way the Russia investigation was being conducted. The administration then chose to defame me, and more importantly, the FBI, by saying that the organization was in disarray. Those were lies, plain and simple.
You know, Heidi, every time I think about Mueller, I think about a guy, maybe not a bloodhound, but a pro, a real winner of a guy. Look at his resume. Heading toward anything we see in the media, any news that develops as somewhat related to this Russia thing because of that Comey guy. I think it's not just friendship, it's professional respect. He knows he has to do a 100% job on this.
Yeah, I mean, he is one of the longest-serving FBI directors. He was Congress passed legislation to extend his term because he is considered such a pro. He has impeccable credentials and is trusted by people on both sides of the aisle. And that's why you see so many members. Now we're learning about Mitch McConnell as well, having been pressured by the president pushing back and trying to link arms and introduce legislation right before they left town to make sure that the president couldn't do something while they were out of town to try and push Mueller out.
That is something, and the president is still putting his fingers in trying to mess with that, still complaining to Tom Tillis of North Carolina.
It's like he didn't learn.
Why are you protecting Mueller? I may need to get rid of the guy is implicitly what he's saying. Anyway, we're going to get a little lighter moment here. Sean Spicer was next to go. He resigned July 21st. Seems like a long time ago. The day it was announced Anthony Scaramucci was joining the White House as communications director. For months, the Spicer show was must-see TV.
This was the largest audience to ever witness an inauguration, period, both in person and around the globe.
You had someone as despicable as Hitler who didn't even sink to using chemical weapons.
He says it's a ban.
I mean, he's using the words that the media is using.
I understand your point. It
is extreme vetting.
The president himself called it a ban.
I understand.
Is he confused or are you confused?
No, I'm not confused. I think that the words that are being used to describe it are derived from what the media is calling this. He has been very clear that it is extreme vetting.
Does the president believe that millions voted illegally in this election?
The president does believe that. He has stated that before. I think he stated his concerns of voter fraud and people voting illegally during the campaign. And he continues to maintain that belief based on studies and evidence that people have presented to him.
What do you think of this guy professionally? He went in there, and he obviously, we all can imagine what goes on.
Right.
He's in the Oval Office, the president. You tell those people, it was the biggest crowd in history.
There are very few people in this administration I feel sorry for. Sean Spicer was one of them. I had worked with Sean Spicer before. He was a hardworking, legitimate, dedicated Republican. And for him to have to go in and lie on a regular basis, you just got the feeling he came home and would just whip himself in the mirror every single day saying, why do I have to do this?
Guy,
exactly. He just, and you felt bad for him. But it set a precedent. It set a precedent for what you have to do to be a part of this administration. Your integrity is left at the door. You have to lie for this president. You have to be dedicated to this president. And even when he eventually leaves you out in the rain, you got to smile and say, thank you, give me another.
Well, I've seen him since. Saw him at the train station a couple weeks ago. He looks pretty happy.
A big weight lifted off his shoulders now. That's definitely true of Sean. But you can feel sorry for him if you want, but he chose to go every day. He chose the notoriety, and he chose the infamy that came from his, 6-month tenure on that job. And, that is a difficult job to work for this president.
It's tough to quit the first week.
It is, but, I mean, his credibility was shot from day one.
He even got so befuddled about something in that it's a position up here. It's the highest position of our presidential spokesman, next to the president. And he's saying that the Nazis didn't use chemical weapons. Well, they used chemicals, certainly. They killed 8 million people, 6 million people. But what he meant, they didn't use it in battlefield situations. Okay, but, even that was being watched. And the guy wasn't ready for this onslaught.
You have to wonder if there was just a level of stress underneath it all that would explain making a slip like that.
What was the president. Trump didn't think he looked right. He didn't like his looks.
He didn't feel he was protecting him enough.
To say
well, he didn't like his looks.
Well, they were picking.
I'm betting on. What's her name? Hope Hicks is coming eventually. Anyway, although Sarah's doing a great job, I think Sarah Sanders, Huckabee Sanders. I think she looks country. She's very much, I think, at ease with that kind of presentation. I think she's probably better for this job. Anyway, she's daughter of an Arkansas governor. Anyway, that's pretty country. Our panel's sticking with us throughout this hour. Coming up, moods.